This is Nikki Nolet from Relationships Redefined, and today we're going to talk about sexual norms. I know that many people ask, what is normal? What's normal sex? How often are people having it? What type of sex do they have? How long does it last? What is the normal positions that people do? Or what are alternative positions that might be helpful for us to use? What do other people do? What are we doing that might be different from what most are experiencing? We also need to think about the sexual scripts that are manifested around us. In Western culture, at least, our sexual scripts are completely cultivated through mainstream media, which portrays sexual pleasure as mutually experienced. And in reality, we know that sometimes that is not always the case. But how we learn the sexual scripts that we adhere to, or the ones that we take on as educational, something that we can do for ourselves, we sometimes are subscribing to something that in reality we may or may not be able to actually adhere to. So what does that set us up for? Possibly really a great amount of disappointment. And I'm sure that's not what anyone wants to experience when you're thinking about sexual norms or sexual pleasure. Sexual norms actually mostly portray penis and vagina intercourse, and there are many ways to experience pleasure and sexual experiences that are not only limited to penis and vagina intercourse. Nowadays, sexual health materials focus on risk reduction, but they really don't adequately address or discuss any of the realities of sexual pleasure. And when we talk about sexual pleasure, it's assumed outcome that if it's quote unquote done right, then we experience pleasure. But it really doesn't take into account the nuances in people's lived experiences and how we all differ from one another. When we think about sexual norms, what often happens is we qualify ourselves against others. And this leaves us as continuously in a state of what I like to call comparisonitis. When this is in comparisonitis, we often are looking at ourselves in either a successful, joyous adventure, like we've done something correct and we're patting ourselves on the back, or we start to be denigrative and critical to ourselves, which inherently really devolves our self-esteem. When we think about sexual norms, what do we do to both ourselves and our partner? Yes, it's important to be educated about options and things that you might be able to consider, but that's often a consideration of actually just starting. So when you think of how long, how big, what position, which angle, I want you to know that there's such a variety that it's really hard to qualify what is normal or what is accepted. You have to think about, how do we learn about sex, right? It's through a lens through culture, religion, the formalities of school, the informal discussion amongst peers. We sometimes learn through porn, which is intended for entertainment, not education. I think if we were to pull the curtain on porn, there would be a whole different light that you might be able to view that construction from. When we think about sexual norms, I want you just to think that there are all different ways that we have sex. We have sex in different times of the day. We have sex when we're excited. We have sex when we're turned on. We have sex when we're stressed out. We have sex when we're tired. We have sex because of social pressure. there are a multitude of ways in which we actually become sexually active. So I want you to have less designation or focus on sexual norms, but actually focus on the pleasure experienced. And our future recordings will actually go a little bit deeper into what are these experiences and how do we make the most of it, both for our individual purpose and for purposes with our partners. But thinking about sexual norms and how we compare ourselves to each other is actually can be very destructive. So we'll talk about sexual norms and what they do to society. We'll talk about how we construct our sexuality. What does that do to us? How do we learn? And we'll continue just exploring different ways in which sex and intimacy kind of have an impact and a factor on how we show up in our relationships. Again, I'm the founder of Relationships Redefined, where we hope to make your intimacy a reality and hope to have a space where you can talk about your relationships, sex, intimacy, and communication. We bridge all of these together. I hope that you're doing well, and I hope to see you in the future with the series, and we'll see what comes up next. All the best.